Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 Podcast. If you're new to the show, what's up? Welcome. The 817 Podcast is the podcast to listen to as we break down and dissect the ins and outs of local politics, business, and culture in the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We start with 3 short stories, then one big story, and then each of the co-hosts will have a win and a loss that they will share. And for today, we're starting in the month of May, our guest co-host shows as we explore the city for the next dynamic and passionate voice as our boy Jimmy departs on the open road and leaves the city. How's that going?
We're just enjoying this spring that we've gotten here. I feel like I've been here for 12 years. I feel like this is the best spring weather that we have had the entire time I've lived here. So we're just enjoying all the wildflowers and being outside. But we have a special treat today as we have Ann Zadeh on the podcast with us. Ann, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back. I've been a visitor to the podcast before. I'm a longtime listener of the podcast, and it's exciting to be here as a co-host today with the both of you and possibility of doing some more of that in the future. So I'm excited to be here.
So since you last been on the pod, give kind of update of what you've been up to since.
So I am in a new role as the executive director of an organization called Community Design Fort Worth, and we are a local design center. We educate and advocate around urban planning issues, which is something that I've been passionate about in my entire career as a city planner, as someone who served on the zoning commission, as well as someone who was in an elected office. But now I focus on educating and advocating about those things throughout the city of Fort Worth and hoping to work on further engaging the community so that more people are actively engaged in those efforts to make Fort Worth a great place to live, work, and play, as us planners like to say.
I love it. Well, I think we're going to have a great show having that perspective on the pod. Well, let's talk about a story that we all are worried about, and that is voter turnout. Have you guys voted yet?
I did on Thursday. It was a slightly different crew in the historic Southside Community Center. Usually you have the same voting officials there, but there were a couple new faces this time, and the telltale sign is if they recognize my 2-year-old or not. But yeah, it took 5 minutes as you expect, and there were a couple people canvassing in the parking lot, but other than that, quick and easy.
Yeah, I voted as well in early voting. I used to always vote on election day until my name was on a ballot. And then I started early voting. And now I encourage everyone to early vote because you just never know what's going to happen. I've had friends be called out of town when they planned to vote on election day and not made it to the polls. And for people who are waiting anxiously to see the results of all of their efforts, it's nice to see that people are voting. And I've been a little concerned about that because a lot of folks I'm checking in with, you say, have you voted? And the answer has been no. There were quite a few folks yesterday at the skate park opening who indicated that they hadn't voted yet. So I think it's something.
Did you skate? Did you get on a skateboard?
I did not get on a skateboard.
I know you like multimodal transit. We could have done a skateboard for you. That would have been cool.
I absolutely support multimodal transit, and I'm going to have a helmet on my head anytime I have wheels on my feet. So definitely was not partaking in the skating yesterday.
Well, I just told myself I have not voted. So I will vote tomorrow, though, because we have early voting till May 2nd, people. Yeah. So you could still be a part of the early crew up until Tuesday.
Yeah, what are we looking at now? Like 1.9%, I think, was the last number I saw.
Yeah, so looking at the story, I'm looking at the Fort Worth Report story. We have only 1.9% of registered voters cast the ballot from April 24th to April 27th. We're talking 23,171 Tarrant County residents who headed out to the polls in the first week of early voting. Have we seen any other data up until now? How do we feel where this is headed? This, to me, is starting to feel concerning. We talked about often, Jimmy, how in different episodes, man, there's going to be people who clearly have this figured out and don't have to worry too much. But with this kind of voter turnout, I feel like everyone has to be a little worried.
I mean, I just think that it's important that people are engaged at the local level. I think we need to remind people all the time about how these are the people that have an impact on your daily life. So you have a say in that. And being engaged at the local level is so important. I think a lot of times voter turnout at the local level is less because people don't have big ticket items on the ballot like a presidential election. And so there's always that debate as to whether or not we should be having local elections in the off years and on, in May instead of November. And there's always been some debate about that as well. I just think everybody should vote in every election. It's beyond comprehension to me to not vote in every election that I've had the opportunity to vote in. And I know that's not everybody's experience, but I would hope that we can impact that by sharing with people how important local elections are.
And I think it would require an amendment to both the city charter and the state law in order to move municipal elections into Fort Worth to be on the same cycle.
Yeah, I've
so
read
that's
that
a tall
as well.
task.
Yeah, and I think even like you said, you're talking to people at the skate park opening, like that face-to-face conversation goes a long way, where I feel like you'll see a lot of individuals, influencers, whoever over the coming week, like share something on their Instagram story or whatever about like, oh, I went and voted. And like, that's obviously a great way to build awareness, but if you just take the time to even just look at your street, the people adjacent to you, and think like, do I think that person voted? Like, do they have a sign outside of their house? Do they even know that an election is happening? And so just like the importance of a number of candidates are running on like quote unquote strong neighborhoods. So if that's the case, like let's bring our neighbors alongside us and make sure that their voices are heard as well, that they even know that there's an election happening, because even though like the signs go up, it feels like the signs never come down. So you don't really know if that's left over from last time, something new for this time.
Yeah, I saw someone in my neighborhood had a Jeanette Martinez and a Ricardo Vitia sign in their yard, so they could just be pitting yard signs in places that people are like, yeah, go ahead, but not even know that the candidates are going into the same race.
Well, I've always heard people say signs don't vote. So I used to have people constantly saying, why don't you have more signs here or there? And that was always the refrain, that signs don't vote, that it's the people that vote. But I, on the way out this morning, ran into some of my neighbors that were all standing around on the corner talking, and I rolled down my window and asked them if they had voted. Two of them I knew had, because they're like precinct chairs. So I definitely knew they had voted. But I think it's important to continue to talk about and encourage people to do.
I also saw that this is the first year that the city of Fort Worth has actually been allowed to drive voters, encourage folks to vote. It's tricky for the city to do this, though, because obviously you have governed by incumbents. But looking at their website, it looks like some social media channels, the communication department also did a small media buy, like ads with the Fort Worth Report to show encouraging folks to vote.
Yeah, I've seen the website being more robust this go round with the information necessary in order to educate yourself. Not taking a position, just encouraging folks to vote. And I always noticed that our neighbors to the east would take out media buys, and I'd hear ads for local voting on, KERA and such. And I hadn't seen whether Fort Worth had ever done that in the past. And when people have complained that the city is not getting the information out enough, this go round, I've been sharing with people that website on the city's website that has all the information about elections and what days early voting is and the hours and what's on the ballot. So I think they are doing a better job in that regard.
And if transportation's a problem, bus rides are free as well to go vote.
Awesome. Well, like we said, we have the May 2nd to do so, and then May 6th is the election just the main shindig. Well, I know we also talked about how this is unfortunate that voter turnout is so low right now because we have our 2 expanded seats, and I don't think a lot of people know how big or influential that could be in our city. Even a friend of the pod, Harrison Mantis, did a post April 23rd on the Star Telegram talking about how the new city council districts and what they mean and can impact. And what is your take on this story? You brought this to the pod for this episode. What was it missing? What was important in it that you feel like people need to hear?
Well, I was excited to see the article because I think it's important to discuss the fact that we have 2 additional districts. But the headline of the article was like, what do these 2 districts mean to you? And I took that to mean everyone, all of us. And it focused more on what it meant to those individual new districts, which is definitely important. Representation for the folks that live in those areas, the far north district, District 10. Some of those people live so far disconnected from the core of the city that they don't even really consider themselves to be residents of Fort Worth. So I think it's important that that district have representation and be a part of the whole, which leads me to kind of the question of what do these two new districts mean for all of us, and what does it mean for the entire city to have 2 additional council members? And I think representation is important, and that was one of the reasons why folks were pushing for additional districts. And so I think they're accomplishing that, hopefully, to have that additional representation on the council. Sometimes people fear a little bit, like, are more people going to have a harder time coming together and coalescing and coming to consensus about things that are for the greater good of the entire city? And I don't necessarily have a concern that that's not going to be the case. I was in favor of adding 2 districts, and I think that 2 additional people can coalesce as long as everybody's keeping in mind not only what's good for your individual district, but what also is good for the greater good of the entire city.
What is the, I guess, when it was 9, I know you mentioned like everyone's afraid of us becoming like Dallas because they have 14. What is going on in Dallas with 14 that maybe makes people afraid of us going to 11?
I've watched Dallas City Council meetings for years, listened to them on the radio years and years and years ago. And I think there was just a common occurrence of people taking their personal battles with each other public. Mm-hmm. And I think in Fort Worth, we have, even when people disagree and come to very strong opinions about things, they come back around other things and are able to continue to work together. And I would hope that, everyone in Fort Worth would feel that that's an important thing to maintain, that even if you have a disagreement, that you can figure out a path forward once a final decision has been made. If you didn't get your way, that you still have the ability to work with your fellow people who have put themselves out there as public servants to represent their communities and work for the good of their individual residents, which is very important, but also keeping in mind, like I was saying before, the greater good for all of us. So I think it's just a matter of being civil with one another and working together.
Yeah, I feel like we also probably have this. I mean, people in general have reservations about change, right? Like Nashville City Council, like a similar sized city or smaller city, has 40 seats with 35 representatives and 5 people at large. Like, we're not going from 9 to 40 and radically changing the way that city council is done. But like, do we need to get to that? I don't know. Like, they have a smaller representative parts, which means that people maybe have more of a voice with their council member, can be more connected, but then things get watered down on something that big. But going from 9 to 11, like, and we see how often city council does vote 9-0, 8-1. Like, it just doesn't feel like that big of a change that it's something we need to be overly worried about especially the first cycle of it.
And I think Nashville, just to be clear, is not just city council members. They're a county-city combination to make up those 40 representatives. So they've been able to do some actually fabulous things with that, because they're the whole region kind of coalescing around those bigger picture things like transportation. So working towards having some more robust coordinated transportation has been successful there because of the fact that the county and the city work together. So maybe that's something we could do better here.
Yeah. What are like some blind spots with, like, because our pod is very, I would say, like in loop kind of pod perspective. When we talk about District 10, as someone who was a city official, what is your take on, you learn about your neighborhood, you learn about your district, but what are some blind spots maybe ourselves as co-hosts on the pod are maybe not considering, or even listeners who maybe just think about their neighborhood, if it's near South Side or East Fort Worth? What is your take on the District 10 edition compared to the District 11 edition, and what that shapes to our perspectives of what kind of people identify themselves as Fort Worthians?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've had an allegiance to Fort Worth and have felt really connected to Fort Worth my entire time living here since I moved here in 1990. And I think that it's those farther away places, maybe we're all in our bubbles. But like you pointed out, you're in your bubble kind of in the loop, and I've been a little bit in my bubble in the loop. When I served on the zoning commission, I was the mayor's appointee. And so I couldn't just focus on the district that I lived in. And that really was eye-opening to go to those places that were further out in Fort Worth. So it just reminds, I mean, I'll get back on my soapbox about transportation and connectivity at any opportunity. And I think that that would be a way to have people be more connected and invested in the city that they live in, even if they're in the farther out areas. And some of the things that I've talked about is that you need to have some of the beneficial things that are in the core of the city in those further out areas so that people don't have to drive everywhere that they need to go. They can have things to shop at, entertainment, all within that kind of 15-minute city is what a lot of people refer to. And I think we can do those things in the further out parts of the city, but also have people be passionate and connected to the culture that we have in the core of the city, because that's for everyone. You know, the cultural district, downtown, all of those things that we have invested in are not just for the people that live really close by them. And if we could get people to those things more easily, they might be more invested in what's for the greater good of the entire city and not worry so much about, you know, what's necessary for them in their bubble.
Yeah. I wonder what the new what the voter turnout's going to look like with the new districts compared to traditional districts with traditional names. You know, 10 doesn't really have a traditional powerhouse. I guess Blaylock's coming back at 10, so they, you know, and then 11 might get a lot of people because it's a lot of people running. So. It'll be interesting to see.
Just thinking about how, like, you know, with the new map being made, one of the points of emphasis was, like, do we need to get more representation for the people up north? And, you know, it's like, I think that there were some maps that even added both extra districts up there. And so at first I was thinking, oh, it's a little bit of a bummer that, like, you know, Alan Blaylock has raised like $10,000. Like, it just doesn't seem like there's much fanfare around the new district up there. But when you think about connectedness, like, that's a group of people who are very disconnected from the urban core and maybe haven't necessarily seen the output of, like, investment the way other districts have, honestly, even in a similar way to District 11. And so it might be a few cycles before we see excitement up there of people, like, getting to feel like their voice is a little bit better heard and that they're better connected to the city because they have better representation now.
Yeah, like, what is the personality of the district? I think most of the districts that have been around all these years have a certain personality to them, and I think that the new districts are still kind of finding their way in that. Yeah.
Well, let's actually move to the Tarrant County news. Last week, Jimmy and I talked about Hyder Garcia and his resignation as the leader of county elections, and Tim O'Hare and the team at Tarrant County has officially began its search for a new elections chief. I guess Hyder resigned over a clash in values with, the new leadership. He got a lot of praise from past leaders and of his colleagues who were there to represent in a time of space and a meeting to talk about him. There was also the big news around, you know, O'Hare's comments around, I guess, if you didn't believe in the Biden election, like, this doesn't disqualify you. There was a lot of clicks and discussions around that on social media and in the news. But I also think there's a lot of good information here when it comes to the process of how they're going to identify their next election chief. What did you guys see in this story that gravitated to you, or something that makes red flags or possibilities of improving?
Well, I think from everything I had seen, Hyder had done a good job, and there'd been lots of stories about the transparency that he had brought to the process and how he'd opened things up and invited people in. And so I think that it's unfortunate that he's leaving, because I think he's done a great job. But I think that the article shares the process by which the decision of the new person will be brought in and the people who are making that decision. And I don't have the article right in front of me to name off all those folks, but it's a collaborative decision amongst various people with various perspectives. And my understanding is that they all have to come to a consensus on who they move forward with. So I think that's a positive thing. I'm always about consensus.
I thought it was consensus, but it's actually just a majority vote.
Oh, yeah.
At least according to the article.
Yep.
So the 5-member election commission is O'Hare, County Clerk Mary Louise Nicholson, Tax Assessor Collector Wendy Burgess, Tarrant County Democratic Party Chair Allison Campolo, and Tarrant County Republican Chair Rick Barnes.
Yeah, I guess I read that wrong as I was seeing it as all 5, which was making me feel calm and go to sleep okay at night. But now that you showed me that I read it wrong, now I'm a little bit more. That changes my view on what that looks like. I think maybe a future pod dissecting more. I don't know everyone on this group, but initiatives, who would most likely be the majority there. And then, I know the Tarrant County Democratic Party chair has been advocating of a lot of concerns and a lot of quotes on the paper around this election committee.
So it's probably another issue of making sure voices are heard. So if you have opinions about important decisions that are being made in our community, I think this is an opportunity to make sure that the folks making those decisions hear from you and what you think they should be taking into consideration when making these decisions.
Well, it's not just the county's election process people are concerned about. Unfortunately, that news is maybe not getting as much news as this next story. The Tarrant Appraisal District and the tech failures that has highlighted a lot of gaps of their accountability and their process. April 15th, if you own a home, which is like 63% of Texans, if you own a home, that those are, you got your, I guess, appraise award letter or bad, signed depending on value and growth, April 15th. And usually you have till May 15th to dispute. They have extended it to May 30th due to looking at the article that was in Star Telegram. Yahoo also picked it up. I guess the apparent oversight gap of local leaders is that the Tarrant Appraisals District's director really, there's no accountability to how do we, when something like the website crashes or people are not able to do these things, who's really there to keep them accountable? It seems like there's some gaps in that this discussed. There's several articles on this. What article did you guys read around this that maybe caught your attention that could provide clarity? I know a lot of people, I think this has been the top story in Star Telegram if you get the paper every day, this has been a front page, top fold or bottom fold story pretty much all week.
Yeah, I think what jumped out to me, I think it was in the Star Telegram article, was the state statute, which requires certain things to be available on the website for folks to be able to look at to put together information in order to protest their appraisal values, and that hasn't been functioning properly. I know that when I got my letter, I went to the website immediately and it was already having some issues, which I think you would expect when those letters go out. Everybody's going to go start trying to check on things. So I think that it was the right decision to give an extension on the time for all of that, since people didn't have all those tools available to them in the time frame. So adding that extension is probably a good idea. I use the TAD Appraisal District website a lot, and I don't know if other people do. I'm just always curious about property and who it's owned by and what the potential is. And so I think that it's important that all that works well. I think the article pointed out that there's not a lot of teeth or ability to enforce on some of these things, and that maybe the state legislature needs to look at that to make sure that those things are happening the way that they should.
Yeah, I missed this the first time I read it, but from the NBC article that this part of TAD's website hasn't been fully functional since last November.
Oh, wow.
Which it's like, how many people are going to protest property things in November? Like, nobody. But you knew what was coming. It's not a surprise that these letters went out and a bunch of people went online to protest, so that we either haven't had enough attention or the right attention on it for... you had a 3 or 4 month runway there at least to get it fixed. It just feels like a pretty big miss to be behind there.
Yeah, technology is great until it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And there's, I guess, with its required law that Texas tax code, that a city with over 500,000 people have to have a website, and that's been in code since 2008. TAD has had a website since 1998. I wonder what that looked like in 98. But so you get an extra 2 weeks. I don't know what that's going to be on the impacts of that, what that has on the impacts on the county, or on, I guess, us getting more and more mail, people trying to do our disputes. Do you guys get those mailers where people are like asking?
Oh, we've gotten
Oh,
three,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
think,
all the time.
that they can help with
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
I think people can do it on their own, but if there's people to help with that, if that's something that you want to avail yourself of. But I think we've received 3 last week.
And they're going to keep on coming.
Yeah, so we'll move on into the big story for the week, and it kind of started from at City Council this week. Visit Fort Worth's contract was renewed, and there were a number of speakers there from East Fort Worth asking and talking about why the Visit Fort Worth map, so the thing that is provided to people coming to Fort Worth, cuts off at 35. So there's nothing east of 35 on the map. And, that has snowballed into a larger conversation around neighborhood development and what it means to develop neighborhoods well, especially, like the Handley district has a lot going on there that I would guess 90% of Fort Worthians don't really know about. But then it kind of, the Fort Worth Report article about Race Street from this weekend came out, which is another part of East Fort Worth that, even though it has been invested in with, some more private public partnerships, like there's still businesses over there struggling. And so just kind of asking the question of how do we bring all of these neighborhoods up to a place where Visit Fort Worth wants to and needs to have them on the map as destinations for people when they come visit.
Yeah, having some history with being on Visit Fort Worth's board and knowing that when we were working on the Race Street improvements and redevelopment, and that there was a desire from the folks up on Race Street to be on that Visit Fort Worth map as well. They're looking at places that are already very robustly offering things that a visitor to Fort Worth might want to avail themselves of. So their concern would be sending people to some place that doesn't have a really robust synergy of activity and having them have maybe a less than stellar experience there, and then that would reflect on their visit to Fort Worth. So you want to make sure that that's a good experience. But I think that those folks from the East Side did bring some great examples of the things that there are to offer on the East Side of Fort Worth, and that working together with Visit Fort Worth to kind of make those more robust and then get them on the map is definitely something that I think Visit Fort Worth is open to. I think that Whiskey Ranch is over there on the east side, and I think that is actually on the map on the other side of 35. So there are some things that they're starting to do. And Race Street is definitely getting more synergy, and I really enjoyed that article from the Fort Worth Report talking about the things that are going on there. But change happens, businesses open and close, and it's not always going to stay the same, as you were talking about. Sometimes change is difficult.
And Jimmy, go ahead. What restaurants are we losing out on Race Street?
Yeah, this month, Zonk Burger and La Onda both closed. La Onda had gone into the space where Gypsy Scoops had been before. But I think it is kind of like two separate conversations that start to mingle together, where it makes sense. Visit Fort Worth is the messenger, right? Like, they're putting the message out about Fort Worth. They're not responsible for development. Like, they don't have development dollars like that go into places, but it also does help provide a focus on where do we need to be investing, or what are the places where people could go spend a day or half a day that haven't been turned over enough yet. I think with the example of Race Street, like, it's taken a long time to develop that area. It's not something that happens overnight. Just the same as it wasn't something, even though it kind of feels like overnight for South Main, like that didn't happen overnight as well.
Not at all.
That was years and years in the making. And so with Race Street, especially, I feel like the next step is how do we connect that to like the Martin House, to the Top Golf, to then downtown, to make it feel like if someone is staying downtown, they can easily get out there and it just becomes a natural extension of their time here.
Yeah, and funny you should mention the connectivity to downtown and Race Street, because I actually walked that and I found it to be not the most pleasant walk, and it's less than 2 miles away. So I think that some improvements to that connectivity could make for a better connection to that and bring a whole nother audience to that area. And, you know, the article did give huge kudos and shout outs to some folks in that area that have been working really hard for a really long time, literally carrying on with street festivals and pop-up things while construction of that street was going on. So I think that the passion and the energy that's there will lend itself to that being successful in the long run, even with openings and closings that they're going through currently.
Yeah, me and my wife, we went to have fun in Haltom City, and we just turned right and went to Race Street just to go hang out. And, you know, a couple dollars later, you know, I came with this cool thrift shop sweater that was out from a festival, got some vinyls, and just saw a lot of enthusiastic people in pretty much every space I walked in. So it does feel like there's a lot of passion, and a lot of people are making a lot out of the area, even when like the festival idea, there was construction and cones in front of it and they're making the best of it. But it was still pretty full. So it's cool to see that. One of my concerns would be about all this is I feel like I know Visit Fort Worth is just a messenger, but I know we have a home run punch or a haymaker that works, and that is, hey, get people to the stockyards and let's do this. What is y'all's take on how do we, I guess, divide the marketing to the stockyards, which I think most people will probably be okay. I wonder if people didn't have us as their friends, what would happen if they walked into Fort Worth and we kind of saved them from just the stockyards and telling them these other spots. I guess my fear is that we don't do a good job messaging even the good parts on those maps that are not the museums or the stockyards, which I think gets most of the language. So like, how would you see us, I guess, market or talk about these things to people who are looking not for the tourist traps and they're looking for, I want to do what the locals do. What brainstorm here? Like, how would you guys think of we could do a better job at that? Because I'm still nervous sending people to Race Street because they might not have the best time. But if I know them enough and I know them well enough, they will appreciate it even if it's not as vibrant.
It's still a work in progress.
Yeah. Like with the Granbury Theater, that's another great example of a district that, man, I know that if I say go to Doc Records, I'm going to get people like, man, Fort Worth is really cool. Like there's things like that I feel make something where the Granbury Theater was possible. But that's another district where it's like, how do I get people there and them not feel like it's a bus? And I think that's what Visit Fort Worth is trying to do is there something like a Doc Records that holds something down even if a lot of things are changing?
Yeah, I think, like you said, like having anchors in different places. And to me, like, I feel like just having green and open space makes a huge difference. Where if, you're Visit Fort Worth advertising the city and you're having someone coming in for, like, let's say a 4-day weekend, the Thursday to Sunday, Friday to Monday type of thing. And you say, like, just go plant yourself in these neighborhoods for a day. Like when we're in Mexico City, like that's kind of how you attack it it's so big that you just like choose a neighborhood to be in and you explore that for the day or half day. But a lot of that comes from all of these spaces having like connected walkable places for you to just exist in and not feel like you have to be buying something, getting a drink, whatever it is. And so I think Race Street like has a lot of that, whether it's Tributary Cafe's been there a long time, and they've got a great little patio area.
The Post.
The Post, Neutral Ground,
Yep.
the record store. But even even that park that's along the Trinity right there was just redone recently, but it feels a little bit separated. But just having spaces for people to exist that don't feel like they have to be going, doing something, like they can just sort of relax and take it in. I feel like that goes a long way. And even, having like Fire Station Park open in the South Side, just like seeing a public area where people are hanging out, I feel like lends other people to wanting to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think having champions for an area is really important. I mean, the areas that are in our city that are being really successful right now have champions that work every day to elevate them and support the businesses that are there. And so I think that the city has kind of seen that that's a successful model, and they're looking at doing that in some other areas. So that there's another article that we talked a little bit about with the historic stockyards and the possibility of having a TIF in that area based on the fact that a TIF in downtown and a TIF in the near South Side have both been very successful models in order to elevate these places. And I think those kind of things could elevate neighborhoods across the entire city. So you would have people that are from those communities elevating and championing the things that are in those communities for the people that are there in those communities, not just to bring tourism in, but tourists are interested in what locals do, as you said, EJ. And so if you're having the community do those things, then it's a natural evolution of those things being attractive to people from the outside, but it's a positive benefit for the people who are already here and the people that live in those neighborhoods outside of whether or not tourists are excited about it or not.
Yeah, I mean, the article that you mentioned really talked about the stockyards doing that, but it almost to me seems what we're talking about today, one, is this something that usually happens in cities? Like there's incorporations. I don't know this kind of history of this, but it seems like a East Side Inc. Or East Fort Worth Inc. makes sense as well, and an Alliance Inc. and doing it a couple times. What is the concern about too many of these, or do we already have more than most cities when it comes to doing a TIF around this?
I don't even really know the answer to that. I know that we have some really successful ones, and I think that it is a successful model because people feel comfortable putting dollars into an area knowing that those dollars will stay in that area. And so it's not like you're paying into this pot and then you might not even see the positive results from that. So I think that that's why it is a successful model. But as far as the question about what other cities do and if other people do it as much as we do it or, more, I think that I don't actually have the answer to that. I would have to go look it up.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it even has to do with our just how spread out Fort Worth is in that, like talking about Deco 969 and like them needing a comp for downtown, like that's, partially because when banks or places or companies or investors are looking at the area, it's like, oh, it's the 13th largest city, but like, what's the difference in that in the loop versus outside of it? Does that make it a little bit riskier? And so like having these organizations to rally around is almost like another step or layer of protection for people wanting to come into those areas of knowing that like good development is happening there.
Yeah, that, and also sharing with folks coming in what the community there has all agreed on is good for the area, so that and then helping them through the process to bring the things that community has identified as being what they would like to see happen there. Again, getting back to what is in the best interest of the people here before looking at, success for a developer coming in from somewhere else.
Yeah, well, that what seems is hard with the stockyard one, because I guess who are the residents who are advocating for like that to like if I lived over there and then you're asking me money to go to this TIF, like what? It just doesn't seem like it seems like a place that's doing really well already that wouldn't. I'm I guess surprised that they're interested in taking this approach when it just seems like they have been moving and grooving with the new hotel, Mule Alley, Tana Hills. It just seems like it's thriving, and it's not the space that I think would need something like this to continue to do the jobs that it's already doing. So I think I find that part of the story interesting of why they're so interested in doing it.
Well, I think there's a broader area beyond the core of the stockyards. I think that the neighborhoods around the stockyards, I think that the historic North Main before you get to the stockyards, kind of the area that's in between where Panther Island is developing and where the stockyards is thriving and booming, as you just pointed out, there is some area that is mainly more locals.
That makes sense, yeah.
And I think that's an area that definitely needs to be assisted, but with the input from the folks that are there. So this is bringing up something that we haven't even talked about in these articles, but the Main Street USA program that the Economic Development Department is working on, one of the areas that is getting that focus and those dollars and that capacity building is North Main and historic north side there. And so I think that that's what they're looking at, not just the area of the actual core of the stockyards that has already kind of hit its stride and is definitely booming without the assistance.
What's your take on like the well, it seems like that all makes sense because words are important and how we frame groups of people. Would something it being called more North Side or be a better brand name than Stockyards? Like I know we had that with Near South Side to Hempville and how we called it Near South Side. It seems like that intentionality that we had with that would probably need to be considered on this, because I feel like the communities in that area, the Casa Azuls of the world, I don't know, calling it the Stockyards Inc. is the collaborative word that I would use for that stripped, even though it is a part of it and squished between Panther Island and the Stockyards.
I mean, there's history in our entire city. And when you start to get involved in an area that you're not as familiar with, you will start to learn from the various parties who's been there for the long time, who's new to the area, what people's intentions have been, what people's relationships with each other have been. And, you know, when you run into those things, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult. But I think that if everybody goes into these things with an open mind and the willingness and desire to work together for a benefit of everyone, then I think you can get beyond those things. But everybody has their history and their names for things and their, you know, what resonates with them and what is familiar to them. And anybody coming in to do anything anywhere in the city needs to kind of take all of those things into consideration.
Makes sense. And yes, and what Jimmy talked about with Deco 969, by the way, everyone, is that Southern Land Company actually had to take out their own internal equity to get off the ground downtown to build Deco 969. The reason to that is, you know, people felt like the 13th largest city was untested to give a loan to build another skyscraper. So I just wanted to let people know that that's what you were talking about when you brought that up.
Yeah, there was an article that talked about the fact that they're already looking for land to do a second tower. So I think they have provided themselves with their own comp, it seems like. And then seeing the response, I think what I read somewhere was that they've got more people applying to live there than they have units already, and they're not even done building. So
nice.
They're already looking around for another location. And I think the idea of people wanting to live in the urban core is growing a lot, and I think that will make more energy and activity in a downtown area, and then making that a place where people can live and work as well. Not necessarily always in offices, but I think bringing more residents to the downtown area is a positive thing.
And good as we look at downtowns needing to figure out something outside of offices, right? I mean, I saw an article about in the Wall Street Journal around a San Francisco tower that was valued at $300 million 2 years ago is now people are offering $60 million. It's down 70-80%. I know Dallas has talked a lot about this in the Dallas Morning News and the commercial real estate. It may be even be cool to have more updates around what does that look like in Fort Worth and our occupancies of our offices and what that compared to the high demands for a Deco 969 and residential, and what kind of transitions can we make to maybe not be as office heavy.
And I think we've seen some of that transition in the last couple of years with some of the things that were offices before turning into hotels, historic hotels, and with the addition of the residences that we were just discussing with the deco. I think that there is a shift with that going on.
Yeah, and it changes so much of the dynamic of like, you know, when we're like looking for somewhere to go out to eat and we look downtown, it's like 75% steakhouses. And that makes sense for like people coming into town from work visits or like people in offices hosting people for lunches, dinners, whatnot. But as that grows residential, like there's a different niche of small business that can now sustain itself in downtown with a dense population of people living there. And then, you know, the next one will be the Central Library. Like May 6th is its last day for public services. And then, you know, as part of that sale, there will be a library downtown, whether it's in that new mixed-use building or somewhere else. But we've got another mixed-use development that will be going up and providing more places to live downtown. And I mean, right across from 3rd Street Market, and you're like pretty connected to West 7th there too. Like you kind of feel like that location, you're getting the best of both worlds of being able to go into Sundance, go into West 7th, easily hop north or south. It's really like a hub for the city, which makes a lot of sense. Like for the hub and spoke model is something that has worked for a lot of big cities, and Fort Worth kind of has the potential of that as downtown develops with living space where transportation can branch out into, when people are visiting there, you can easily get to North Side, get to South Side, get to West 7th and the Cultural District, get over to Ray Street and the East Side, and like we really see growth and connectivity blossom from there.
I think we're branching out away from all the articles that we are specifically discussing, but that connectivity I think is really, really important. And I think we touched on a little bit about circulators providing that connectivity so that people aren't all having to drive in their cars to get to those things. But I think that's something that Trinity Metro is looking at with the Dash circulating through the Cultural District and the possibility of a circulator going to the stockyards. And all of those things would touch on the things that are more immediately adjacent to downtown. And so people could have that ability to get to those things without everybody driving to them in their own single occupancy vehicles.
Yeah. No, we had the art festival last weekend. I saw you there. I ran into you. Jimmy, did you end up going to
Yeah, we went on Saturday.
What else?
Ooh, that was the crazy busy day.
It was so windy. Yeah. I mean, it was busy and it was windy. Like I'd just get nervous with all of that art out, and like the wind tunnel that is like right by the AMC goes through, and I'm just like, oh no, like please don't let anything get blown over.
Yeah. No, but yeah, it was a pretty busy weekend, and makes me think about all the things we've talked about. And it'd be maybe even cool, you know, just like a local visitor's guide, how to visit Fort Worth once you visit the stockyards. And there's like 10 different people from 10 different districts. Maybe you do all 11 districts, and, you know, you just have a guide on the Visit Fort Worth, you know.
How to be a visitor in your own city.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, something like that.
That could be a fun thing, like take someone from each neighborhood in Fort Worth and ask them to develop a guide for spending a day there.
Because I could keep people in District 11 and have a good time. I think I could pull it off and be like, yeah, this is Fort Worth. Welcome. And they have no idea. But anyways, let's go ahead and move to wins and losses. I told you I wasn't going to do wins and losses due to time, but we're actually doing well on time, people. And so I'm going to just get my loss out because it's been something. I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring this up. My loss was a Star Telegram article around the Ubby Dubby Festival. I know people think it was Ooby Dooby. I thought of that the whole time until the DJs started yelling LBW the whole day. So, but I went, and it was one of the best times I had in Fort Worth. They had the concert venue, they had 3 stages, the skyscraper behind the main stage, and just to see the beauty of the city from that way. And then they had an amazing fireworks show. 20,000 people. I think I said 5,000 people. That's how bad at the jelly bean in a jar game I was. But 20,000 people attended this thing, and I just felt like an article about one noise complaint, and the title being about locals being upset of the noise, I felt was like we could have really highlighted this as something that was good for the city And, I advocate to keep it here as much as possible. I think Dallas has a scene for that. When you look at Austin festivals, we have tried a while to have a festival here in Fort Worth with Fortress Fest. This was a natural brand that got people here. They logistically know what they're doing. To me, it just felt like this is something that we need to advocate for rather than have an article about it being too noisy. When we had one complaint
I think
for the festival.
Communication ahead of time is always a good thing to let people know that something's happening so they can be prepared. As someone who lives next to a very active university that has some popular sporting events that impact my neighborhood on a regular basis, I don't begrudge living next to an active university because I think that's a fabulous environment to live in. And when I know that some big activity is going to happen that's going to impact my ability to get around or is going to be loud, I adjust my schedule for that day and don't, desire to have everything shut down or change for me to continue to live my life.
It sounds like you're out there with $20 signs with cones parking in your driveway.
Not doing that. I'm encouraging people to take public transportation.
We did that in college when we lived close enough to the stadium.
Oh yeah,
$40 park in the front yard.
Look at that.
Yeah,
look at that.
Our landlord just said as long as we saved a spot for him, it was okay.
What are your guys' losses?
My loss is Fort Worth legend died this week. Vernon Fisher, he is a mixed media artist, died at the age of 80. He has had his work shown at more than 40 museums around the globe, including London, Mexico City, the Guggenheim, and Whitney in New York. He's someone who is thought of as one of the most important artists to ever come out of Texas. He passed away this week. So, lost a Fort Worth legend. I would love to see one of the museums try and pick up some sort of exhibit around him to honor him in the next couple of years. But, that's my loss for the week.
And I think my loss is something we already talked about, and that is just that we have such low voter turnout. But the internal hopeful optimist in me is sharing this loss at this time because we're still in the early voting period and election day is still yet to come. So hopefully we can turn this loss around even just in the very near future to try to encourage folks to participate and have a better turnout in voting going forward.
Definitely go out and vote. I'm going tomorrow with my wife and my in-laws. So that's 4 votes right there. That's a serious vote for District 11 right there. I'm just going to let y'all know 4 votes right there. And but let's go ahead and go into wins. I'm going to show a win that it was a tweet actually from Robert Stearns about best places to start a business. There's a Wallet Hub survey that he tweeted out, and Fort Worth was number 9 as the best place to start a business. They had 3 rankings: business environment, access to resources, and business costs. We got this high. We jumped Austin. We're over Raleigh, North Carolina. Atlanta was ahead of us. Charlotte was ahead of us. Number 1 city was Orlando, Florida. So I'm now judging this survey as a whole. But business costs, we were the highest of the top 10 after Austin on that. So that was probably the place where I learned a lot. But the win is that even with high business costs, as a good thing, like the score was we were the highest in the sense of we had the best business costs, so that it wasn't expensive, it was affordable. So everywhere else was much more expensive to do business, but we were really low on the business environment, and the way they measured that is just like the combustion of businesses, the amount of people who are starting businesses in the city. We were one of the lower ones, so that was a win just to be in the top 10.
Well, my win is a new business opening up in Fort Worth. A group of local entrepreneurs has unleashed a tequila brand born in Fort Worth but created by utilizing Mexican traditions. So La Pulga, it is founded by Sarah Castillo, who you know from Teenies, Taco Heads, Andrew De La Torre, who's a club owner and operator of Pequeño Mexico, and Steven Slaughter, a local entrepreneur and real estate developer. So you can already buy the tequila both online online and in liquor stores. But they are taking over one of the open air markets, the one right next to Rockwood Go-Karts as you're headed north on University, and they are planning to turn it into a new distillery. So talking about, breathing life into some of those areas around the stockyards in the north side, something to be really excited about.
And in addition, it's not just taking it over and turning it into a distillery. They're very intentionally keeping an open air market there as well. So supporting some of the activity that's been going on that people feel very passionate about and want to continue to have happen. So that's part of their plan as well.
Which, if you want a really authentic Fort Worth experience, Saturday morning at that market or the one on the
Henderson?
Yes, on the bridge, just over the bridge. Both great experiences.
I don't think I've done either. Need to make it happen.
There you go. So my win is something that happened yesterday, and that was the opening of the fire station park, which is Dickey's Skate Park. And it is a win in so many ways that I don't even know if I can verbalize them all, but it's a project that I was really involved in helping acquire the land like over 8 years ago. It was so much engagement of the community, having a say and input into what was going to be placed there and what that was going to look like. The skater scene was super involved in all of that with fundraising and designing and just having all kinds of input. So the community engagement piece to this is something that the work that I do now with Community Design Fort Worth, being focused on engagement and having people be engaged in their city. I think this is an example of when you are engaged and you're patient through a long bureaucratic process that can sometimes be frustrating, that the result can be amazing places for people and communities. And my hope is that we will continue to do these type of things throughout the whole city so that all areas of our city can benefit from having these kind of fabulous things.
And that is a great way to close out the 817 podcast. And thank you for coming on as our first guest host. You did fantastic.
Thank you.
And Jimmy, we will continue to have you to June 4th, maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
June 4th will be the last one.
Yeah.
So there we go. So, hey, guys, this went well. I thought we were going to go extremely over. We hit an hour. Look at us. So, all right, everyone. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow, like, share it with a friend. Links of the stories we talked about will be in the description. And you guys have a great week.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Swipe, dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, control your life. Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, like double tap.